So the British economy is not performing well. In reality, the economy is stagnant. Growth has been really poor throughout the years. We're talking about less than 0.5%, quarter after quarter. And, like the US economy, the UK is being propped up by massive deficit spending and borrowing money to keep the wheels moving. And Labour is going to plunge the country further into debt by doubling down on this strategy. Now, spending isn't always bad. It's how the money is spent that matters. The UK just released its budget, and Starmer's administration intends to increase expenditure even further. He's going to spend a lot. More money will be directed into public services, as well as increased investment. But will this plan succeed? We may compare this to what China and the US are doing. Beijing is spending heavily on businesses such as electric vehicles and electronics. In addition, the United States is investing heavily in technology and renewable energy sources. The two largest economies are directing funds to industries of the future, sectors where global demand for products and services will increase. Eventually, the globe will spend money on US and Chinese goods. As a result, external funds will pour into their economies in order to stimulate growth. So there's a fundamental difference here. Over the next 5 years, the UK plans to increase its spending by more than $90 billion each year. So that's over £500 billion more. Furthermore, the public sector will spend £100 billion over the next 5 years. This is a double-edged sword that might have disastrous consequences. The question we have is basic. Can this additional expenditure generate sufficient economic growth in the UK to make sense? Because it is plainly unsustainable in the long term. Most Western economies today are substantially in debt. And if you spend money inefficiently, you will simply cause a worse inflation catastrophe later on. Furthermore, because the UK lacks the reserve currency, it cannot borrow a limitless quantity of money in the same way that the US can. They cannot monetize their debt or print money without serious consequences. For the next 5 years, the UK will see a significant increase in deficit expenditure. If we subtract all of their spending from government income, there will be a chronic gap. Every year, London will have a deficit of 20 to 40 billion pounds. This, of course, will add to the national debt. Increasing the debt burden is a highly dangerous decision. You'll have to pay the piper someday. Here is the issue. The market does not trust that the UK can preserve its own economy. The 10-year yield has surged to its highest level in a year. In December 2023, yields were just approximately 3.5%. Today, it is about 4.5%, 100 basis points higher. It's the same predicament that Liz Truss had with her tax cuts. People feel it would result in more inflation than economic development. This is particularly terrible news for the United Kingdom, whose economy is perpetually stagnant. Bondholders, including pension funds, are losing a lot of money. More critically, the debt load will grow to unsustainable proportions. It brings the UK closer to the day of reckoning. The market as a whole does not trust the expenditure plan will succeed since it effectively shifts money from the private sector to public works. Money is being spent on transportation and the NHS, for instance. All of these are undoubtedly significant, but they do not address the issue of industry. Earlier in July, Labour said that the UK was broke and that the Conservatives had left the economy in disarray. That may be accurate, but it is critical that we investigate the failing areas of the UK economy. This graphic displays the industries with the most bankruptcy in the first 5 months of 2023 and 2024. Construction, retail, automotive repair, restaurants, and manufacturing. These are the sectors having the highest bankruptcies. The private sector is collapsing due to high input prices and, of course, increased borrowing rates. As you can see, the increased budget has initiated this daily feedback loop. Rachel Reeves wants to spend more, but the market does not trust her. Interest rates have recovered. So, if you're an auto repair firm wanting to grow or just survive, securing a loan will be more expensive. Your costs rise, leaving you with just 2 options: raise consumer prices, or declare bankruptcy. And this is why fiscal expenditure must be carefully managed, especially if your economy is vulnerable. You have very limited room to move about. Higher interest rates are a major concern. It doesn't simply make your mortgage more costly, it also ruins small companies across the country. In June, the UK had about 2,400 firm failures, the third largest since the dot-com crash. As loan rates rise, UK businesses will face further pressure, and if you think things couldn't get any worse, they can. To some extent, her expenditure plan does not rely entirely on deficit spending. The tax burden on UK firms will increase. There is a reason why the gilt market is selling down. Investors are wagering that their budget will not work. That is more of a stimulus push, which will raise inflation without raising output. The public sector wins, while the private sector loses. REEF's budget is set to climb from £26 billion this year to over £80 billion by 2028. Extra taxes will also rise by around £40 billion. This amounts to a net giveaway of £30 to £40 billion every year for the next half-decade. So half of the increased expenditure will be taxed into existence. Tax increases aren't necessarily negative. Money all depends on how efficiently you spend money. If you can enhance economic production, such as the supply of commodities, it would be beneficial overall. But personally, I'm doubtful since it's going directly to public services. This may or may not help the British economy flourish in the long run. However, Starmer's gamble is a huge one. His proposed tax increases of £40 billion would be the largest in history since 1993. It is comparable to 1.25% of GDP, and that's a significant amount of productive production being transferred into the British economy. While it is true that there is a chronic lack of government investment, taxing productive sectors of the economy to redistribute income is not ideal. And when we look at the mechanics of the tax proposal, we can see where the real bet is. The majority of the taxes will be paid by large corporations and the wealthy. The UK is raising the inheritance tax on affluent foreigners who make money overseas. Capital gains tax will also rise from 20% to 24%. As a result, investing in the United Kingdom will become much more complicated. However, large enterprises in the United Kingdom will bear the brunt of the damage. Employers' national insurance (NI) premiums will rise by 1.2% to 15%. In addition, corporations will be required to begin paying NI at lower income levels. Over the next 5 years, the UK plans to generate more than £100 billion from this new system, which requires the UK's largest firms to pay for public works improvements. Once again, I must underline that rising taxes for expenditure is not the problem. The question here is how the money will be used and if the results will be long-lasting. However, there are two major issues with this strategy. Pushing money into public works is more of a sugar high. Yes, you are investing in the British economy, but will it be productive and produce additional jobs? According to the OBR, this fiscal stimulus will not sustain growth for long. Yes, GDP would rise significantly in the short run. Labor's budget will boost GDP by 0.6% in 2025 and 0.4% in 2026. However, the effects would eventually collapse. And by 2030, the budget would cause a negative growth shock. This is why there is repudiation in the bond markets. Investors do not believe the UK can achieve enough real economic growth to repay its obligations without weakening the currency. However, rising bond rates would exacerbate the issue significantly. Businesses in the UK, large and small, will find it more difficult to borrow money and develop. So we may have a decreasing private sector in exchange for more public sector growth, which is an unusual trade-off. This has resulted in total anarchy in the UK Parliament. Sunak is returning for revenge. Now, Sunak isn't the greatest PM in the world. We can all agree on that. But he has a point here. The UK's tax burden is steadily increasing, and the more north you travel, the more difficult it is to conduct business in the nation. Taxes in the UK will reach 38% of GDP, so taxes will account for more than 1/3 of economic production, and this will result in historically high taxes. It will be larger than it was after World War II. Even the United States is considerably below 30%, which says something. This makes doing business in the United Kingdom almost inconceivable. But taxing your firm for 5 years might make matters worse. Unlike other major countries, which are self-sufficient, the United Kingdom must attract investment. They cannot afford to keep running deficits indefinitely. Their consumer base is simply too tiny to support their economy. Foreign direct investment in the UK has been stagnant. Since 2020, it has been less than $1.6 billion each year on average. The UK cannot provide enormous subsidies to attract investment, and their present budget of tax increases may work against them. When firms decide to invest in a nation, they look for a number of factors. They want a low-tax environment so that they may keep more of their earnings, which should be evident. They also wish to do business in a country with a booming market. However, UK consumers are becoming tapped out, so that is a significant difficulty as well. To make matters worse, people's living standards are predicted to stagnate for reasons that should be evident. Raising corporate taxes may result in lower wage gains. While increasing government expenditure may result in high inflation, you are effectively squeezed on both ends of the spectrum. According to this budget proposal, the UK's real disposable income will expand by just 0.6% each year. Sure, even accounting for inflation, but it's still a dreadfully sluggish climb. And are the inflation indicators really correct in the first place? This also indicates that UK consumption will be sluggish at best, and large-scale expenditure will not boost growth. And, as a foreign corporation, this isn't exactly a strong recommendation to invest in the UK. And this makes me think of building a bridge to nowhere, rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, and praying for a major miracle. So Britain is in a horrible predicament. They can no longer borrow, especially as interest rates skyrocket. They cannot raise taxes without further destabilizing the private sector. But tell me what you think. Will the new British budget work? And how can the UK economy turn things around? Please let me know in the comments below. Stay safe. Be sure to like and subscribe as we navigate these tumultuous times.